Welcome to the Workplace Minute, powered by H3HR Advisors and sponsored by WorkHuman. Thanks for joining me for your quick update on what's important in the world of work. My name is Steve Boese. Today we're talking about digital monitoring, AI surveillance, and what happens when managing people starts to look more like managing machines. It's time to think about the growing world of workplace surveillance and what it means for trust at work. Let's break it down. The catalyst for this conversation today comes from a recent story about Burger King and its new AI assistant called Patty, as covered in the press. Patty is designed to listen to employee interactions with customers. The AI system analyzes things like whether or not Burger King workers say phrases like "thank you" and "welcome to Burger King." It evaluates friendliness. It can assess tone of voice. And eventually, managers will be able to ask the system just how their location is performing on things like customer friendliness. So think about that for a moment. An AI assistant quietly monitoring conversations between frontline employees and customers, scoring the interactions, flagging language usage, quantifying warmth. On the one hand, you can understand the business case. Quick service restaurants and fast food restaurants operate on razor-thin margins. In brand consistency and customer experience, they do matter. Think about how at Chick-fil-A, employees always say, "my pleasure." And if technology can surface patterns, like whether greetings are consistently delivered, that data might help managers better coach employees and identify any performance gaps. But let's zoom out a little bit. This story isn't just about one fast food chain experimenting with one new type of AI. It's part of a much larger movement toward digital employee monitoring, and that trend's just accelerating. We now have tools that track keystrokes, tools that monitor an employee's screen activities, software that measures active time, platforms like that analyze Slack and Teams metadata, and managers who just look at the green status indicators on Teams or Slack as tools for proxies of productivity and work effort. And there are systems that flag inactivity and algorithms that rank performance based on your digital exhaust. In remote and hybrid work environments especially, the temptation to instrument everything is enormous. Leaders want visibility, certainty, and measurable signals that people are, in fact, working. But here's the core question. Does more monitoring of employees actually produce better performance? Or does it just produce fear? There's a meaningful psychological distinction between coaching and surveillance. Coaching implies support, development, and trust, and surveillance implies suspicion. Employees are not naive about these systems. When people know they're being monitored, they don't just comply, they adapt. They might try to game the system. They'll move their mouse to avoid inactivity flags. They'll schedule their Slack messages or emails. They optimize for visible activity instead of meaningful output. And they focus on saying the right phrases rather than delivering authentic service. And over time, something else happens. Trust erodes. Research consistently shows that excessive monitoring increases stress and reduces engagement. And when people feel constantly watched, they experience higher cognitive load. They become more risk-averse. Their creativity drops. Their initiative declines. And instead of focusing on solving customer problems or improving processes, employees start focusing on just not triggering these systems. And in frontline environments like fast food or quick service restaurants, imagine what this feels like. Not only are you handling customers to a busy rush, but an invisible digital evaluator is scoring your tone and your word choice. Is that going to make someone more genuinely friendly or just more scripted? Now, to be fair, the technology itself is usually not inherently harmful. This kind of data can be useful. Pattern recognition can surface blind spots. And in certain contexts, compliance, safety, or quality assurance, this type of monitoring may just be necessary. But intent and implementation matter enormously. If monitoring is introduced primarily as a disciplinary tool, employees will treat it as such and as a threat. But if it's framed as a developmental tool, but it's used punitively, then credibility disappears. And if managers rely more on dashboards than actual direct observation and human conversation, then their leadership capabilities decline. But there's also a broader cultural issue here. When leaders default to surveillance, it signals a belief that employees cannot be trusted without oversight. And once that trust is lost, it can be very hard to rebuild. So how should leaders think about this? Well, first, transparency is non-negotiable. If monitoring tools are used, employees should understand exactly what is being collected, how it's being analyzed, and how it will or will not be used against them. And second, proportionality matters. Not every performance question requires a technological solution. Before implementing monitoring software, leaders should just ask, is this problem truly about visibility? Or is it about unclear expectations, weak management training, or poor feedback cycles? Third, prioritize your outcomes over your activities. Measuring Slack available status buttons is not the same as measuring results. Measuring phrase usage is not the same as measuring customer satisfaction. If leaders obsess over inputs instead of outputs, they create performative work cultures. And fourth, and this may be the most important, you should invest in managerial capability. Coaching is a skill. Giving feedback is a skill. Observing performance constructively is also a skill. If we deploy AI systems because managers lack confidence in actually managing people, then we're solving the wrong problem. And finally, remember this. People cannot feel psychologically safe if they believe they're always being watched. And psychological safety is foundational to good performance. It drives learning, innovation, discretionary effort. When employees feel trusted, they're more likely to go beyond the scripts. When they feel surveilled, they're more likely to stick rigidly to them. We should be careful not to recreate the assembly line model of work in a digital form, where every movement is timed, every word is tracked, every pause is suspect. Knowledge work, service work, and creative work don't thrive under industrial-era work assumptions. Technology will continue to evolve. AI tools like Patty will become more sophisticated. Monitoring capabilities become cheaper and easier to deploy all the time. The real leadership test is whether we choose to use these tools in ways that reinforce our trust or undermine it. Because at the end of the day, managing people is not the same as managing machines. People need clarity, feedback, purpose, empathy, support. They don't need to feel like they're under constant surveillance. So let's all resolve to try to use these technologies more wisely and more humanely. And let's strive always to build workplaces where trust is measured not by dashboards or AI tools, but by the quality of our relationships. That's it for today's Workplace Minute. Thanks so much for listening, and a big thank you to WorkHuman for supporting the Workplace Minute. If this episode made you think about how your organization trusts or tends not to trust, please share it with a colleague. I'm Steve Boese, and this has been the Workplace Minute from H3 HR Advisors.